You know that expression that if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is? Well, that kind of rings true with this particular journey I took. On the 30th of May this year, I returned from a rail fanning trip which proved unfortunately highly unsuccessful and, well, basically loaded with bad luck, with the exception of the train ride back and forth to my destination of Boston. Again, I'm working very hard on that MBTA project. I have not forgotten about it. I'm still working on it, much like a lot of my other projects. Hang in there, folks. I will get this out as soon as I have it ready, but not before. Now, of course, the first thing running through my mind once I arrived home that evening of the 30th, for while the trip could certainly be considered at least somewhat successful, it clearly did not accomplish what it had set out to do, was of course to get back up to Boston and film the trains I was looking to film, specifically from the platform of the Worcester, Massachusetts train station, located of course in Worcester, Massachusetts, right across from the CSX Intermobile Yard, which is one of its appeals, as well as of course the traffic running through that station, as well as possibly get some footage around Reedville Station. In scanning the Amtrak app, I actually found a pretty tempting deal which I would in the end decide to take Amtrak up on. I could take the usual train I prefer to use for this route from Albany to Boston, known as the Lakeshore Limited, with a first-class accommodation, meaning in this case a private room, for less than $150. To put this price into perspective, you usually have to pay an additional $150 on top of the usual coach fare to get this particular accommodation. So this was a bargain, and I decided I couldn't resist it, especially since I had time off coming that following week. I had requested this time off to take a trip with my parents. However, as it turns out, we ended up going on this trip a few weeks earlier due to the way things worked out. As I had the time off due to the fact that I was off-season at work, I decided to book a coach as a return trip, as unfortunately I could not get the sleeping compartment for the return trip back for whatever reason. I wasn't sure exactly why. I then found a good price at an inexpensive hotel, which worked out to be really great in the end, and was pretty much all set to go from that point on. And so I happily began to pack for a trip that should essentially allow me to make up for all the lost footage I didn't get the previous trip, although I would get a lot more than I expected, and not in a good way. Initially, and for most of the week, my first-class accommodation private room that I would take on Amtrak all the way up to Boston was something I was really and truly looking forward to, but also contained a lot of practicality. For example, it was going to be an interesting novelty I could take some footage of and have an enjoyable ride, much more relaxing than that of sitting in a coach seat, especially if it was overcrowded, as the train appeared to be. Unfortunately, needless to say, this was not going to be the case. Somewhere just under 48 hours before my departure on said train, I received an email from Amtrak letting me know that the train had been canceled, but not to worry, that all would be well as they have arranged, and I quote, alternative transportation. And so at this point, one could be forgiven for thinking that they had simply put me on a different train, and that's what I thought at this point too. Luckily, and I credit my college education for this, having gotten a combination of business as well as IT and internet training, I'd been aggressively instructed, if you will, to not only read documents like this between the lines, but read them thoroughly and all the way through. And sure enough, that's where the problems became very, very prevalent. As I read further down on the message sent by Amtrak, I soon discovered that in fact I would be riding a bus, although this was not expressly pointed out. It just mentioned that the bus would not be stopping at all stations, as we see here. And so it became very clear that not only was I not going to get my first-class accommodations, but I would have the infamous, as they call it, bustitute. This is to say, a bus substituting for a train, which is never a good thing as it tends to slow things up. And then there's, of course, the fact that buses tend to have less legroom, and I tend to get motion sickness on buses, but that's another story. I was less than enthused about this rerouting by Amtrak and decided I would have to call Amtrak the next day as it was already late and I needed to get to work. Funny thing I noted after I received this particular email from Amtrak, if I went back onto their website and punched in the same dates, I could still book the same train, again, train, with the upgraded first-class roomette accommodation, with absolutely no mention/documentation that this would in fact be a bustitute, or a bus, whatever you'd like to call it. And in rechecking the website when I got home that day, I found outrageously enough that the same thing was true again. Said train could be booked and was again a train, not a bus, with the first-class accommodation upgrade to a roomette, which is what I had purchased, still available and still essentially being there, with no mention of this again being a bus or in any way having the train not be part of it. So clearly something wasn't on the up and up. Either the email wasn't correct or the website wasn't, or perhaps both. More exactly what was going on here later. After calling in finally and getting a human person on the other end of the line with Amtrak, I explained to the representative that I was not going to travel by bus, especially at this ridiculous price, and again pushing $200 round trip due to the fact that I had booked first class on the way up to Boston. The representative checked the website and confirmed that yet again it was still selling this as a quote train, not a bus, but then noted the email/notification that had been sent out that of course confirmed my side of the story. I was then informed that her system had crashed and she would have to reboot it but would call me right back. After waiting about an hour and not receiving a call back and having had enough of this nonsense and also needing to get to sleep as again I work nights, I called back into Amtrak and basically joined the queue again. After waiting something like another half an hour to 45 minutes on hold, I reached another representative and informed them what had happened, and the fact that I didn't know whether or not I had a train or a bus since I had conflicting information and the website said something different from what their notification they had sent out to me said. And that again, if I was taking a bus, I did not want to take the bus, especially for that price. This next representative again confirmed what I had said was accurate, and also informed me that I should be receiving a refund for my first class accommodation, although clearly this had not happened as of yet. I was told I would have to speak with the customer relations department to rebook my trip accordingly, as I decided I wanted to go via the Northeast Corridor, not actually via the bus. Now this actually makes things more awkward, not to mention adds more time to my trip for me, despite the fact that the Lakeshore Limited is notably slower, obviously, than the Northeast Corridor. The reason being is because I'm in upstate New York, I need to take a Hudson Line train down to New York City to connect with the Boston-bound train via the Northeast Corridor. This adds another 2.5 to 3 hours to a trip that usually maxes out somewhere on 5 to 6 hours depending upon the traffic conditions on the Boston section of the Lakeshore Limited. All this said, however, the fact was that my hotel was now within its cancellation period, which meant I could no longer get my money back, so it was in my best interest to make this trip happen. And so for no additional charge, but again no refund, I was booked on a Hudson Line train that would get me to New York City, where I would then connect with my afternoon Northeast Corridor regional train that would take me up to Boston and get me there about an hour earlier than the Lakeshore Limited. This train having also been booked for me by the customer relations department. Now needless to say, this is kind of irrelevant at this point because I've already spent an extra 3 hours traveling, so the extra hour isn't much of a bonus, although in this case I wouldn't even get to enjoy that. More on this later. The next day was departure day, and so I headed down to Hudson, New York, where I would board my Hudson Line train for New York City. The Hudson Line train, which is seemingly common as of late, was loaded to the brim with passengers. I eventually found what I thought was an unoccupied seat, but unfortunately was. I apologized to the person who was sitting next to me, which was actually from the real estate industry and operated out of Vermont, who I enjoyed chatting with for the duration of the journey down to New York City. So when we get into the tunnel, it'll just pick up electric power, and yeah, this way you don't get the exhaust fumes in the station. Metro North has a bunch of these too. They're supposed to now get replaced with Siemens engines, I understand now, at some point in the future.
Okay.
Or MOV equipment over here. That's interesting. Maintenance of way.
What's that?
Maintenance of way, MOV.
Yeah.
MOW, or what am I saying? I'm losing my mind as well.
I think one of my ancestors in Chicago worked on the, what was it called?
As is typical with Amtrak, I arrived a little late into Moynihan Train Hall Penn Station due to a signaling problem that was encountered as we went through the tunnels just entering the station itself. Or at least that's what Amtrak called it. Upon arrival, I followed the signs to get to Moynihan Train Hall and took the escalator up to the main concourse of the station. It was here that I would reap the benefits of what would turn out to be an extremely smart decision I made before I left home, and that was to purchase a pass to the actual Metropolitan Lounge located in the Moynihan Train Hall, utilizing my Amtrak loyalty points. And given the fact that I would have nearly 2 hours of layover, it made perfect sense. Furthermore, in addition to the fact that you get free, as well as very well prepared food, I might add, you also gain priority boarding for your next train, and this is an excellent advantage for myself, as of course the regional was at almost maximum capacity. As such, I would start the journey with a window seat and wouldn't even have a seatmate for most of the journey. Of course, this again would change. So far, but it may get taken later on, but it's not bad yet. It's not on the right side of the train either, but it works well enough. Getting some good shots. Just going over Hellgate Bridge right now. Yeah, it's right across from the Tappan Zee or whatever that used, not the Triborough or whatever it is now, yeah. The Triborough. Yeah. Yeah, we're just crossing it right now. We're just on it right now, yep. Yep. Yep, that's where it is. I can see it right now. I'm on the right side of the train. I think it's the I think that's the white. No, that's the Throgs Neck. Pardon me. Or it's no, it's not that. It's the what used to be called the Triborough, I think. Yep, left side. The trip started off well as we cruised over Hellgate Bridge and into Connecticut. Yep, I know we're just getting off the bridge right now. We're just turning off of it now. Yep, it's a really nice bridge to go over. Okay.
Stanford's next. what time will we hit New Haven?
New Haven around 4:20ish around there.
Okay.
The trip would continue for many, many miles smooth. I was getting some great shots too, as you can see from this footage. Not to mention about 2 or 3 hours of solid sleep. Unfortunately, this wouldn't last. Now, please note this next shot, which is actually quite controversial in itself. A regional train, which again is a lower priority train on the northeast quarter, passing in a cell set, that doesn't happen. And it began to confuse me when I saw this. And unfortunately, there was a very good reason for it. As I would find out at our next station, which I believe was Old Seabrook, we came to a halt and didn't get going again right away. The conductor came on the PA system and informed us that we had been stopped here at the station due to the disabled Acela train we had just passed. Effectively, the train was going to be drugged down to us with a locomotive, or at least that was the plan at the time, and then those passengers would be transferred to our trains to make things more annoying. My fellow passengers and myself did not receive any kind of explanation as to why they didn't just simply drag the train all the way into Boston with the said locomotive, but for whatever reason this wasn't possible. And so our already almost at capacity train would have an additional 300 passengers squeezed into it. This in turn would delay us several times, as we had now missed our slot and would be subject to whatever traffic was ahead of us.
Mystic. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, if you are standing at a door that is not staffed by a conductor, that door will not open. If you are still unsure where to exit, front or back, the cafe car will open for Mystic.
Tomorrow. I don't know. I have done my best. I can't say
I've done my best. You have to come tomorrow. You could be there at that.
My normal time. Imagine I just never told you. I'll be at my normal time.
Sorry. Enjoy the rest of the trip.
But Jack, I leave right now.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Look at your show.
And so the journey ended up taking an additional hour and a half, bringing me in slightly later than the Lakeshore Limited would have gotten there. And I'm pretty sure, just to rub it in, the bus beat me to South Station after all of this agony. Nonetheless, I made my way to my hotel, relaxed for a little bit, and went to bed at a reasonable hour, as I had a lot of railfang to do the next day. The next day I was up at 7 a.m. to help accommodate the long length of the trip to Worcester, and after enjoying a bowl of cereal and milk for breakfast, I promptly called a Lyft and made my way over to South Station. To avoid a highly annoying and frustrating mistake I had made several times before, I purchased the ticket while I was in my rideshare for the MBTA, so I could essentially just get on the train I needed to make it right up to Worcester. And yes, I did board said train. Unfortunately, not long after getting aboard the train, an announcement was made that the set that we were boarding, despite the fact that the scheduling board had said otherwise, was not going to Worcester. And so, myself and the rest of the passengers had to detrain and head back into South Station. About 10 or 15 minutes later, the proper platform was assigned to it, and we finally left for Worcester. The trip went pretty smooth up to Worcester, other than the fact that, as you can see by this footage, I was having a huge problem shooting out of the window due to the appalling condition the MBTA commuter rail system has allowed the windows on their coaches, even their newer coaches, as sad as this is to say, to fall into.
The train to Worcester, folks, I don't even know where to begin. It's confusing, it's embarrassing. Really, I don't have any excuses as to what's going on with the past 2 days, especially with this train. I apologize. Like I said, I can't even give you a reason, because I'm a little stumped and perplexed by the whole thing myself. The next station stop will be Back Bay. I guess the bright side of this is that we're only 10 minutes late, not 25 like we were yesterday. Take it for what it's worth. Next station stop will be Back Bay again. Back Bay will be next.
Now approaching Back Bay.
Finally, I arrived at Worcester and began to film the trains. Initially, it didn't look so promising until I started noticing more and more activity across the way at the CSX Intermobile Yard.
Train number 529 to Worcester is estimated at 11:18 a.m.
I got some great shots of some ES series locomotives shoving cars back and forth.
Train number 542 is scheduled to depart at 12 p.m.
I was hoping to get some GP40s, but didn't see any of them. I also caught a few MBTA trains that were running back and forth between Worcester platform, and again, there is only a single platform currently at Worcester, or at least at the time I filmed this, open. And so this meant that the MBTA trains tended to block my view of the actual intermobile yard when I was filming trains, as again, they had no other place to pull up on.
Worcester Line Train 537, 11:45 a.m. from South Station, is operating 5 to 15 minutes behind schedule between South Station and Worcester due to mechanical issue.
As it was now approaching 2 o'clock, it was almost time for Amtrak's Lakeshore Limited to arrive at the station, outbound from Boston, and of course the inbound train to arrive sometime around 3. Needless to say, I was very curious to see if in fact the train would show up, or in fact it would be the bus that was substituted for the train. I was shocked to find there were several passengers waiting out on the platform to try to board the quote train, and it became very clear the train was not coming. Amtrak had not bothered to inform any of the passengers apparently that the bus had been substituted. Eventually a security guard came on the platform and started rounding up the passengers that were supposed to take, and I quote, the bus to their next destination, not the train. Many passengers had again no clue that this was actually going to happen, and were still very clearly under the impression that in fact they were taking a train, not a bus. Epic communication spell, Amtrak, epic communication spell. And unfortunately for many of the passengers, this would not be the last time I would hear of this particular issue coming up on this particular trip. I had planned to stay into the evening at Worcester, but it became very clear around 3 o'clock that the traffic had essentially stopped moving, and it wouldn't be moving again, as I saw a lot of people leaving the intermobile yard and no shift change coming in to replace them. And so I grabbed a train to head back to South Station. This would be another mistake I made, as unfortunately I was hoping to actually do some train shopping that day at Charles Row, but I was not going to make it back in time as they close at 5, and the train would only get me in there 20 minutes before they would actually shut down, and again the trip from South Station to Charles Row is over 20 minutes. And so, as they say, that ship had already sailed.
Now approaching Framingham.
And so I stopped at South Station, stopped at the food court and purchased myself some Chinese chicken and broccoli for dinner, as well as a water, and enjoyed my early meal, until of course a homeless guy came around trying to get money out of me. I promptly then decided it was time to head back to my hotel, because obviously there wasn't anything else I could do, with both train shops having shut down at 5 o'clock, and the hour now being far beyond that of 5. And not wanting to deal with rail fanning during the rush hour period, as this could be quite hectic, I decided I would grab a rideshare to get back to my hotel, which was ridiculously expensive. Due to what appears to be extreme traffic, the trip was going to come back at nearly $50, which I was not going to pay for the under 6-mile ride. I then decided to take advantage of one of my hotel's amenities, and that was a free shuttle from JFK UMass, which is a combination commuter rail as well as subway passenger station, by taking an MBTA train out there. This actually would work out very well, as this ticket only cost me a whopping $2.50, the ticket rates being unaffected apparently by rush hour versus non-rush hour rates. After the short one-stop trip on MBTA, I promptly arrived at JFK UMass and took my free shuttle back to my hotel, where I would enjoy a relaxing evening before I headed out the next day. I really wanted to do some shopping at Northeast Trains as well as Charles Rose Supply, although there was a bit of a problem, as I was supposed to check out at 11 o'clock as with most hotels, and while Charles Rowe would open up at 9 o'clock, giving me plenty of time to make the transition, Northeastern Trains wouldn't open until 10. And so after breakfast, I asked the front desk if they could do anything for me. I was informed that the hotel was at capacity, but they could push my checkout time till 12, giving me just enough time to do the 2 shopping trips to both Northeastern Trains as well as Charles Rowe. And so I promptly called a lift, went to Charles Rowe, and then hightailed it over to Northeast Trains, making it back just before noon, and buying some much-needed things for my layout. And you'll note these are HO gauge supplies. Hint, hint, wink, wink on that. So stay tuned for more action on what's going on with that particular layout, as many of you have wanted me to bring it back, and I am working on it at this time. With all this done, I quickly packed my bag and headed out of the hotel, checking out 1 minute late, although the staff didn't seem to have a problem with this and were more than happy to accommodate me. And I must say, I'm going to be using this hotel again, which is a Ramada located at Mosley Avenue, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, as in addition to the fact that I found the service quite nice and the room nice and clean. I also like the fact that apparently this was at one point a motel and was very retro, and there's something about the charms of these things that interests me, but then again, considering my interest in vintage trains, I guess that makes sense. I digress. So anyway, I headed back to South Station in hopes of getting a smooth trip back home that I could at least enjoy some of, although I knew I would have to sleep through some of it, as again I was low on sleep, having gotten up again at 7 o'clock and having not gotten enough sleep the night before. Upon arriving yet again at South Station, I ordered, yes, you guessed it, chicken and broccoli once more. Yeah, I don't have a very exciting palate. It was here, unfortunately, that yet again it would prove that Amtrak's epic communication fail had happened yet again, as the passengers trying to get to Albany and or to Chicago, which of course is where the Lakeshore Limited runs to, seemed to have no idea that they were taking a bus, not a train. An announcement came over the PA telling the passengers to head toward the ticket booth for information as to where they were going to go to pick up their bus. And this appeared to delay the bus's departure. And speaking of delays, you guessed it, my return Northeast Regional train was held up at the station for some unknown reason. Apparently they were cleaning it. It took an extra 20 or 30 minutes to board the train by the time we finally did get on board for the second time on this trip, and quite annoyingly so. We missed our slot, and essentially this messed everything up, causing us to fall behind on all the traffic, making the journey on the already at capacity train even more unpleasant. This also, of course, affected my ability to shoot video on this trip, as I did not get a window seat. I would really not take much note of this, as I was so tired I effectively sat down and passed out in my seat for a good 3 or 4 hours of my long trip, which would turn out to get longer because, again, we had missed our spot and were once again behind all of the other traffic, effectively, as they say, riding the yellows. And this would have a further knock-on effect, as my connection out of New York City was actually very tight to go back up to Hudson, New York on the Hudson line yet again. The train was due in at 6:09, and I was due to depart on that train at 6:49. As it turns out, after all the delays had been counted up, I was actually not going to get in until about 30 minutes after this train departed. I guess so. I got to get there tonight, so yeah. And there's no charge for this, right? A call into Amtrak, which finally got me connected to the customer relations department after speaking with the first representative, proved to be effectively a waste of time, as the rep was unable to change the reservation on the train, her response being it most likely is because everyone was being rebooked. And so I promptly, once I arrived at Moynihan Train Hall, headed up to the ticket counter and had to have my ticket changed manually. Yeah, I'm here. I just dropped here for a second. Okay, so I just have to go to the ticket booth, right? Okay, so I just go right to the Amtrak ticketing area where the waiting area is, right? Okay, all right. No, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Once all this is worked out, and it now being sometime after 7, and my new train, just to make things more appalling, only departing around 9, due to get me home at 11 o'clock, several hours later than I wanted to be, I decided it wasn't worth bothering with the Metropolitan Lounge, chiefly because that lounge closes at about 9 o'clock, and my train wasn't due to depart until at least 40 minutes afterward, and even this schedule would not be adhered to, as it would turn out. And so I got myself a wrap sandwich and made my way over to the seating area for Amtrak passengers, which actually proved a very close second to the actual lounge itself. While not quite as comfortable, there were plenty of outlets and, of course, free Wi-Fi. And, well, yeah, there were no free drinks, let alone food on offer. But I handled this by buying 2 more Diet Coca-Colas with my dinner. And then came even more delays. Apparently something had gone on the platforms, as I heard a remark over the PA system asking for the Long Island Railroad Police to actually investigate a disturbance in the yard, track 20 specifically. And sure enough, all the trains that were supposed to arrive, including a Keystone service, all wound up showing up late. Including my train, which would only depart in the end at around 10:47. This meant that I was not even going to get home at 11:30, but I would only be arriving just before 1 a.m. in the morning at the station. And I do really feel guilty about this. Sorry, Dad, as my father had to wait for the extra time, although I did keep him abreast of the situation. And so I finally made it onto the Hudson Line train and into my station and caught this footage of the train departing. Would I call this my most successful train trip? Obviously not. Did I have fun? Well, yeah, I guess I did. It certainly would have helped if Amtrak could have been a little bit more effective in its communication, most specifically to give out the information about the bustitution, as it's called, in a less cryptic manner. I'm currently debating whether I want to call up and deal with a representative for seeing about getting more of a refund or something back for all the agony I was put through, as it seems to me that Amtrak knew full well that this was going to be a bustitution/bus substitution for this particular trip, and the company deliberately left its booking as such, and the cryptic language used to describe what was going to happen to my trip, and the fact that the company still didn't change and or update its website to explain as to exactly what was going on to its passengers, as many passengers, as I said again, even on that last day of my trip in South Station, still had the misconception that they were taking a train, not a bus, even though this had been long since cancelled, and again, their website never was updated to show this. Anywho, I'm going to stop beating this dead horse as much as I have already. That's going to do it for this video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If not, thumbs down. Please like and subscribe, and as always, keep the metal side down.